right, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for everyone participating in the chat there. Welcome to our professional development seminar for today. I am extremely excited about this one. This is an example of serendipity, the right people and the right stuff at the right time. And I couldn't be more excited for this. First of all, welcome to everyone. If you haven't yet, please drop a note in the chat about where you are from in the world and be entered into our draw for a Kodeco book of your choice. We have a lot. But yeah, drop your note in the chat about where you're from. Love to see our global audience come in to hear this today. This is our professional development seminar as part of our professional development seminar series that we run here at Kodeco. And today we have the People First Leadership, a key to successful dead teams. This was spawned by a really fantastic article by Manda and Frederick, actually, who we'll introduce in a second here, which is on our site. It goes into depth about some of the 5 key things that people can use in people first leadership to help grow successful teams and stuff that is not innate to us, especially those of us that are new leaders as well. So I brought 2 people today. I've had the honor and fortune to work with both of them over the years as well. We have Janet Shih as well, who is our head of content at Kodeco. She's an experienced instructional designer and content strategist with an undying love for books, libraries, and local history. Me too. Janet is also the recent recipient of the Top 100 Technologists to Watch Award from Women Who Code. And speaking of Women Who Code, we have Manda Frederick, the author of the article here. Manda is the program communications manager for Women Who Code. And the organization's mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And Manda has been involved in publishing for over 12 years, and of course, in the tech space as well. So welcome both. Thank you very much, Janet. Man, it's such a pleasure to have you on here. I wish I could have you on for hours. There's so much to dig in here too, but I'm going to try to get a step out of the way and give you both the space to kind of talk about your experiences with people first leadership. Manda, if it's okay, I'd like to throw it to you first. One of the when you did the article there, and I was reading through it, you set a really good scene about why people first leadership is very important. We talk about leadership as kind of this amorphous umbrella a lot, but why is the focus on people first leadership so incredibly important right now?
Thanks so much. It's nice to see you all virtually and to join here today. I was thinking a lot about this and sort of what inspired me to write the article. And something I noticed working in the tech space for 5 years now, and also I worked in academia for a number of years, as you know, Chris, and medical publishing for a number of years. Something that I've noticed is that you see a lot of really smart people who love to do what they love to do. They love to develop, they love to research, things like that. But in order to elevate in their careers, to reap the benefits of maybe all the education they put in, to become top in their field, there's sort of this normalized, predetermined path that they will also become people managers, right? And I think a lot of people become people managers who never intended to do that. And also no one's checking to make sure that they are developing the correct skills to do that job well. It's just they become the department chairs, they become the team leads, right? And that's just by benefit of leaning into their career potential and their earning potential. And a second trend that I see happening is that I think for a long time, many years in the professional space, people could be not that effective as a people manager, and they could get away with it because there was less movement. People were more stuck in jobs, right? Or they didn't have a basis of comparison. But now in our really global world, our remote world, our really connected world where people are, blasting bosses on Twitter or, there's all of these things. I think people have a higher awareness of how they want to be treated at work. And so I think that intersection of those two things, a lot of people who accidentally become people managers don't develop the skills to do it, intersecting with that people are expecting their people managers to be good at it. I think now is why this conversation is so loud right now, right? Because people are needing to develop these skills in order to retain teams and have teams that are happy who want to stay at their organizations. But I'd be interested to hear also what Janet thinks as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Janet as well, and just to introduce Janet, by no accident has become a great leader of one of our largest teams at Kodeco, which is our internal content operations and management team, but also our contributor team of 300 plus people as well. Janet, I've seen some tremendous things with the content team lately. What are your thoughts about the importance of people first leadership, especially now?
I like to tie everything I do back into the process of learning. And borrowing from a quote from the book, Design for How People Learn by Julie Dirksen, the idea is, when you ask somebody, what was your favorite subject at school? 99% of the time, the person will say, oh, I had this amazing geography teacher in 4th grade, or I had this, it's never like, I read some amazing textbook and I loved it. It's always about people. And I think that for that reason, I think to build a product and to work together to achieve anything that seems impossible, it's people first. It's much more about the people who will walk through these steps with you and alongside you than about the end product itself. So I see, how I see collaboration. I see how people work together as a way to learn, and learning is also where you put people first, what they want to learn and how they want to get there. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think I could pick no two better people in here to sort of talk about that process. Manda, what you've outlined in the article is sort of, I think, 5 key things, and I think there are 5 core things to people first leadership. I'm just going to iterate them here. Make a daily commitment, develop people first KPIs, which I was speaking with Manda just before we joined here. I think is a fascinating idea. Listening and communicating, which are not the same thing a lot of the time, and leading with empathy too. And what I'd like to do is just tick down that list, actually, and dig into each, because the article does a wonderful job of introducing it, but this is where the magic comes in for all our attendees. We get to actually dig into this a lot deeper. Manda, I'm going to leave with you just about making a daily commitment. I think that's there's a lot of talk about personal productivity and self-motivation, things like that. But how do you find making a daily commitment plays into all of this?
Yeah, definitely. I think in the article, something I talk about is that, no 2 days of people management are ever going to be the same, right? Because you might meet with someone yesterday and had a really good communicative, collaborative, exciting session. And then maybe something happened in their personal life during the night and they show up to work the next day, or they're not feeling well, or some other dynamic happens, some news happens in the tech industry, whatever it is. And that person suddenly that you were collaborating with, whom you were collaborating yesterday, they're not the same person that you were collaborating with. And it's interesting because yet maybe yesterday they didn't need extra empathy. They didn't need extra communication. They didn't need extra. But today, with the daily commitment that you make as a people manager, today I will show up for my people in the way that they need today, right? And not taking sorry, there's like a runway 5 for the airplanes right above my head. So you might hear an airplane a few times. And so I think that making a daily commitment is recognizing that maybe you've got this, employees, or you've got these people or whatever on your team who maybe just didn't need something from you in a way that they do today, right? And if you aren't, I think, aware of that in a really conscious way of showing up in the morning or afternoon, whatever your work schedule is, and just committing to whatever my people need today is how I will show up. And that's the work I'm willing to do. That's the very best way that you can move forward.
Yeah, Janet as well. How do you find that this dynamic relationship with your team shows up in your work?
Yeah, I think to Amanda's earlier point, we're never the same from day to day, and I'm not the same today versus yesterday. So I think it's important to recognize that we all have good days and bad days, and really just give people the benefit of the doubt, because we all have all kinds of things that are going on. And something that I read a while ago that really resonated with me too is that unless you can really truly get behind somebody's eyes, you don't really truly know how people are feeling or how they're dealing with things. So I think going into every day with that in mind is important. And the other thing too, in terms of a daily practice, I think having ritual is really important too, having a team ritual that it doesn't have to be very formal. It can be very, very casual. It's a way to kind of set the tone of that daily practice is really nice as well.
I love that idea about rituals. Actually, it's something I see coming up again and again, not just here at Kodeco or in what we do, but in other associated communities as well. It's the importance of the rituals as humans. That means something to us innately. Janet, I want to hang on to you for the second question as well, because Janet, you and I worked with the rest of the executive team to build up our our formal OKRs and KPIs for this year, and that was an exercise in a lot of directions. But Manda brings forward the idea of people first KPIs. What are your thoughts about? We all have organizational goals: moving ahead, making money, the success of the business, the success of our community. But how do you think about people first KPIs when you manage teams?
I think thinking it's really easy because it's key performance indicator, right? So sometimes we think about performance and we think about the end result. And one way to think about people first KPI is to think about the process of getting there, the journey of getting there. And I think that then enables us to think about individual strength of each person, because I don't think it's always fair to give somebody a very challenging task without clear directions or without an end goal and without proper support. And I think being able to come up with the right type of support does require having an understanding of each team member's individual strengths, as well as how we can best support them. So.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. It's not the same bar does not apply to all people, because success can be measured in many different dimensions, as we know. Amanda, does Janet's comments line up with your thoughts about people first KPIs and how to take a people first approach?
Yeah, and I think of all of the things in the article and all the things you can do, this is the most practical one, right? If you're attending this seminar because you're like, I'm managing people and I'm struggling, or I'm a little mystified by it. If you are an analytic person, a linear person, a numbers person, this is the most practical step that you could implement. It's the most pragmatic, right? You can check yourself, right? Maybe you're not implicitly an empathetic person, or you struggle with like your listening skills, like some of these softer ones you need to, but for sure you can create checkpoints for yourself as a manager to make sure that you are checking in with people and to evaluate what they're doing. And I think this is the very most, if any of the things, I would say the second one, developing people first KPIs, checkpoints, to make sure that you know that you're taking care of the people on your team. It's the most practical step that you can do. And exactly what Janet said about individuating them to the people also will just yield even better results.
So there's definitely a divide between what we count as like formal OKRs and KPIs. And when they're handed down from above, they tend to be very financial focused. They tend to be very points and winners and losers focused. Amanda, how do you suggest to bridge the gap between a classical management structure that kind of looks at a business as just numbers, and how do you bridge that to say, no, people really are a bigger part of the equation?
I mean, I think that's can be tricky, but I think that the data will show that. I mean, if, for example, numerically, if your retention is bad, right, you have employees who are leaving. If your people being unhappy is costing your business money, that's numerical, right? It's in the way to fix it is a people first approach, right? So it's interesting because it seems non-traditional. It seems maybe softer. It seems maybe a little more emotion driven, something like that. But really at the end of it, like good, responsible business practices account for the fact that there are real people who are operating your business. Now, if you are running a factory and the factory is producing all of the units, you don't have to worry about these things, right? You can just like turn the factory on, the machine's on for 24 hours, no big deal, bigger output. But I think that if your HR department is having to spend a lot of time doing mediation meetings, right? That's where their time is going. If you are losing employees, right? And you have to spend money to recruit and train new ones. I think that if you actually look at the bottom line, that the traditional management practices work in that if you look at how your business is performing and it's not performing well, you should probably take a look at how people are feeling and how you're treating them, I would say.
So just another question, Amanda, for the benefit of our audience here. If you had to pick, say, just arbitrarily, three people first KPIs that we could give our audience as maybe starting points, in leading their teams, what would those three things be for people first KPIs?
Yeah, I think that setting goals for yourself, for example, for feedback, for surveys and feedback, right? Actually getting concrete, normalized consistent feedback where your team has a space and opportunity. Maybe it's anonymous, whatever, but if you have some numbers at the end of your year to say, overall, they're happy, unhappy with how things went, I think just building that in would be really helpful, right? Setting a goal for yourself as a manager to get a certain amount of feedback at a certain level. I would say the check-ins are really important. I think both informal check-ins, setting yourself, I will informally meet with my individual team members to see how they're doing as people once a month, right? Maybe it's 30 minutes. I see these managers putting these 10, 15-minute calls. We can't get anything done in 10, 15 minutes. If you're going to do it, I think do it, right? Like meet with them for 30 minutes or an hour, really listen to them. Don't make them feel like they're part of your checklist, make them feel like they're a person that you want to hear from, for example. I think that the informal check-ins, and then I think the third one would be setting formal check-ins where people are getting really concrete feedback on their performance. Because as we talked about with like the Brene Brown, right, like clear is kind, right, giving them really concrete, clear feedback about their performance, and then giving them really concrete steps to make corrective measures to so that everybody is aligned on what needs to happen. I would say those would be the three for me.
Yeah, I think the importance of these 15-minute check-ins, I don't want to call them superficial because they're not. You can get some done in 15, but I think you can touch the work level, and I don't think you ever get down to the person level in those 15 minutes because it takes a while to get past that first barrier, right? Yeah. Okay. I want to move over to listening here. I'm going to pass this over to Janet too. There's a really excellent book. I've read it many times. It's called Reboot by Jerry Colonna. And one of the things that he as the author does in the book and in his practice as well is that when he meets people, he says, "How are you?" And we always have this pat question, this pat answer, I mean. And his immediate response is, "No, really, how are you?" And Janet, I've seen a tremendous effort on your part of building a good culture of listening, not just in the team, but in the company and probably everyone you deal with. How do you approach listening like in a really effective way with your teams?
Yeah, I will start with a tip that I have, and then I want to also circle back to Manda's previous points about developing people-first KPIs. So a thing that I have also in Manda's article is about listening without judgment. And I would also add that we should try to listen without problem solving. I think as a manager, it's very easy when someone comes to you with a problem or with an idea, right? And I often find myself thinking, okay, so will we have budget for that? How will that fit into our workflow? How are we going to prioritize this idea or deprioritize it? So I think that's immediately me not fully listening. I'm trying to solve this for somebody, even though the intention is good, it does divide my attention up in a way that's not super helpful. So I think listening without trying to solve the problem, take notes, obviously. And in Manda's article, she also mentioned, take action, facilitate action immediately. And I would say that's, again, that's not the same as problem solving in my head while I'm listening, right? So just knowing that, giving yourself and leaning in, if you will, into what the person is telling you, taking notes, and then, facilitate actions afterwards. I think that's a really useful way of listening and active listening. And the other thing that I wanted to circle back to what Manda said about surveys. I think it's important to, when we develop people first KPIs, right? Reading is listening too, like actually spending the time to read what people wrote, people's feedback on satisfaction surveys. And because that is really concrete data that we can't necessarily collect otherwise. And we also need to take into account the fact that people express ideas and feelings differently. So yes, we can ask people questions in a one-on-one, but oftentimes it can take an individual. Some people need some time to think about it, and some people find themselves express themselves better in words, in written form rather than in conversational form, right? So I think listening plays into how we, read and respond to feedback that people leave in their surveys.
Yeah, it's fantastic. There's this actually segues directly into our next point. But yeah, to your point, Janet, there's so many different communication styles. And I as much as I like to talk, as a lot of this audience knows, I express myself way better in writing. That's kind of my core thing too. So I think it's important to sort of look at all the inputs you're getting from across your team as well. So going into communication, I'm trying to move along because we've got some excellent questions in Q&A I do want to get to here. Segueing directly into communication, Manda, I'm going to throw this to you. One of the things that really stood out in your piece was where you talk about uncertainty in communication. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, so I briefly gesture towards some research about how the human brain works, right? And if you haven't read our article, it's not a deep dive, so I can just summarize it for you as well. But so the way that the human brain works is that the human brain is tasked with keeping us safe, right? And so it perceives uncertainty as a threat, right? And sort of like your lizard brain will activate if it doesn't know what's going on. And so it's really important, and that's going to translate everywhere, right? Like maybe you haven't heard from your partner in a whole day, and you're like, where are they, right? Or like, your mom never responded to your text, and you're like, what's going on, right? The way that anxiety, and that plays out in the workplace too, when your people aren't sure what's happening, right? They know management's making changes, they know things are moving along, things like that. And the way that the human brain will process that is as a threat, and it will reflect in their behavior and their attitude and their morale toward work. And something else the brain will do is that when it doesn't have certainty, it'll make a story. It'll assign a reason, and that can be really dangerous when maybe you haven't given an update to your team for a really agnostic reason. You're just waiting on one little small thing, right? They don't know that. Maybe they think there's about to be layoffs, or maybe they think like it can really create a lot of problems. And once that seeds, it's really hard to unplant it, right? It's hard that degradation of trust starts. It can be really complicated. So something I talk about in the article is that it's just really important to communicate transparently, again, because as I mentioned, people can handle difficult information, right? If they can handle tough information, it's no information that's problematic. And also often do not give them time to start writing a story. And again, it's not because they're paranoid, it's not because they're bad people, it's just how the brain works, right? It's no one's fault, but you have a chance to get ahead of it as well.
Yeah, it's the old adage, no news is good news, is not the case in here for sure. Janet, in terms of getting ahead of people writing their own stories in their own heads, because we do it, it's a human thing, it's a lizard brain thing, we get it. Janet, in remote organizations such as Kodeco, where do you find the most challenging, I guess, where do you find the biggest challenges in communicating to people, not over communicating? How does that take place in your daily work?
Yeah, I think, being transparent, being timely with the information that I have available to me is important. But I will also say, and it's something that's quite hard to do, especially if you are a leader but you're new to an organization where everyone at the company has been with the company for longer than you have, right? I think one way to tackle this is to be okay with saying, I don't know. Like, I'm being honest, I don't know. This is the information that I have. And because I think in my past as a newer manager, I often feel like, well, people are looking for me for answers, for information. So I have to come up with something, whatever it is, right? I have to go look for it. I have to figure out, or even I don't want to do this, but it's the worst thing to do is to make something up, right? And just to look like I know what I'm saying. So I think it's a big part of it is being vulnerable, being okay with saying that, hey, I don't know, and I will find out.
Yeah, I would agree. I think like I don't know is a valid answer, because we don't know, although the expectation is that your boss knows everything, and the information hiding is what drives the relationship. I wanted to ask something as well, Janet. What in terms of Amanda's uncertainty and fear, people write their own stories when they're uncertain or don't know. The hierarchical nature of organizations as well creates a bit of uncertainty, because there's a bit of fear sometimes with bosses and employees, and we always, as all the introverts in the crowd, me included, The worst thing we can hear is, yeah, can you drop by my office for 5 minutes? Oh, it's nothing important. And, it's the worst thing in the world. What would you suggest to people to overcome this natural, mild fear that's created with like hierarchy? Like someone has to talk to their boss. How do you help people overcome that uncertainty?
I think having trust is really important, and cultivating trust. It's not something that's built overnight, and it has to start, from the very beginning, when someone comes on board, either as a new employee or as a new manager. Every single day is an opportunity, and every interaction is an opportunity for us to build trust. And I think having that trust there can really help mitigating a lot of that uncertainty, because uncertainties are unpredictable. We don't know when they will show up. We don't know how deeply it can really affect people on the team, right? So I think having that trust, so a person going into a conversation will know that their manager will be approaching this conversation or this uncertainty with a lot of kindness and compassion. But it has to start with trust, and it's not built overnight.
Yeah, it's a long game. It's a long game. Amanda, I want to go right ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Because I also want to stress here the importance of normalizing feedback. If your team is only getting feedback during high stakes moments, they've done something wrong or they've just done something right? Then it's always going to feel high stakes. It's never going to feel easy. But this is like I said, the informal check-ins, and you keep those dates. You're not breaking, you're not moving meetings, you honor them like they're important, like people are important, right? That you want to show up because you said you would, to listen, to give feedback, right? I think if it's normalized, this is, we see this in the workplace, but I think it's also you see this with like your partnerships or maybe your kids or whoever. If people can expect a flow of feedback between the two of you, they can give it, you can give it. It's not a big deal. I'm just communicating to you how I feel. It feels a lot better, right? It doesn't. But if you only wait until the moment where it's super necessary, you're never going to get to a place of trust, I think, as Janet's saying, where people feel like it's okay. And every time your boss calls you for a meeting, it's going to feel stressful, right? It always is. So I think normalizing the feedback, keeping it normal, will go a long way as well.
Yeah. So, and as well, Amanda, would you say that in the spirit of normalizing feedback, I would suspect it's probably very important to have feedback be a regular part of a person's existence, other than saying, oh, feedback at the end of a project is either reward or punishment. You did good, you did poorly. Is that the expectation that, as Janet said, it starts from the front and feedback is normalized throughout their tenure?
Yeah, I would say definitely. And also the giving and getting feedback. And again, not just about how their performance is doing, but also how they are as people, right? How's it going? Like a buddy check. When Chris and I worked together for a number of years, and a buddy check was a really normal thing between the two of us, right? And it went a long way just to make sure so that we could interact with each other in a positive way, given whatever was going on, given whatever the day. And so, I think normalizing the feedback, keeping it consistent, but also remember that it's not always have to be about the work, right? It can be the whole picture.
Yeah, because the whole picture is the human, is the person. I think everything here is leading to the last point here about leading with empathy, because I think this is kind of coloring everything in this article and discussion. And then I want to get to I got some questions here. I'm going to try to get them to as best I can, my audience. Amanda, we all think we know what empathy is. We think we know, but we're kind of poor at implementing it. Tell us and the audience, what is your take on empathy? How does empathy show up for you in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that empathy, again, it seems kind of, some people like, I'm an empath and I'm an empathetic person, and some people label themselves not that. And once they label themselves not that, they think that they're not capable of it, right? Or maybe they've been given feedback that they're maybe a little more selfish, or they're not emotive or something like that. And I would encourage people to separate empathy from emotion. I know that's normally how we define it, but I think that you can make it cognitive. I think that it's an understanding. I'm making an effort to understand your position, your ideas, which is, if you need to make a Venn diagram, even if you need to make it simple, make a list, like, here's what I think, you can make it a cognitive process. And I think in the workplace, it doesn't necessarily mean just like, you have this employee who's going through a really hard time, so you like excuse all of their work. No, it's that you can look at their situation, say like, okay, well, they're functioning at 80%. So maybe for a short time, let's agree on a period where they're performing it, their output's 80%, right? Things like that. You can make these sort of like steps in an empathetic way based on how you understand their situation to be. And I think that's the primary way that I think people separate it from like the warm, ooey gooey feeling. And I think that's what prevents people from thinking that they're capable of it, because they're like, well, I'm just not a big feeling person, so I guess I can't do it. I reject that fundamentally, because you can make the work. You can do the work to understand someone else for sure.
Yeah, Janet, does Manda's explanation of empathy about making the effort to be there for people, especially when people have difficult personal situations, do you agree with that? Is that how you see it showing up in your work as well?
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, I agree. And I think that, again, how people show, how they share their internal world or their personal lives, like that's also something that's developed overnight. Not everyone is going to tell you everything about themselves from day one. It does take time. And I also want to add that using multiple perspectives is another way to develop empathy. When, in a work situation, when there is a project related challenge, asking for input, it's a great way for us to understand how each team member solves a problem. And everyone will approach it differently based on, their background, their experiences. So it's a really good way to also just see how different people solve problems. And I think once you account for that multiple perspectives, you can then think like others. And I think it's a powerful way to develop empathy. Yeah.
So when you say multiple perspectives about that, can you dig into that just a little bit more about how that sort of works at a fundamental level?
Yeah, so I think people can people can try to solve the same problem in very, very different ways. So, to make this sound very project oriented, I would say if there is a common problem statement, right? There's a problem statement about something specific that we are trying to solve as a team. Arriving at multiple perspectives is talking to team members, either in a group setting, in a small group setting, or in a one-on-one setting, asking them, how would you solve this? With the resources that you have, with the perspectives that you have, how would you solve this as an individual? How would you work with others to solve this? And I think over time, this could also be about a problem that's not necessarily related to work. There could be some kind of scenario like, hey, I'm trying to figure out this situation with finding childcare. Do you have thoughts on how I can do that? Do you have ideas, or how have you done that? So gathering multiple perspectives, again, very gradually, and also, on different things. It doesn't have to be, as Manda said, it doesn't always have to be about work. It could be about a personal problem or something that we're trying to solve.
Yeah. So looking out for those perspectives really helps us embrace kind of what you might call the multidimensionality of our people then. Good. I've got some excellent questions. Thank you so much. I'm going to put these out. I'm going to try to get them all if I can. Let me start with trust. I think that's a big one, and trust is a very hard thing to do. It lacks in organizations. We do our best to build it. I'll start with Manda, actually. Manda, I've got a question from audience here. How can someone new to people management work on building trust in the team when it clearly seems lacking?
Yeah, I think that I'd be interested to know more about how it's clearly lacking, like how you know that, because I think that would be your first step in like developing a rubric of how to move forward, right? For example, if for example, maybe the trust isn't there because they perceive you to be inconsistent. And you can look at your own organization's behaviors. Does the organization say they're going to do something and then they don't, right? Is your manager consistently, are you as the people manager consistently breaking meetings that you have with the person? You tell them that you'll deliver something for them and then you don't, right? That is a big corroder of trust. So I would say if that's happening in your organization, fix it, right? And I think over time, showing up consistently and showing your team members that you're reliable will do a long way. And I would say the other thing really is listening. I would say these one-on-ones and making it a truly safe space to say, I want genuine feedback here, right? I see there's something not working here, and I would really like to fix it. Are you willing to collaborate with me on that? Are you willing to help me understand what's going on right now? Because most people, I think they don't, it's stressful looking for a new job, right? Or it's like, whatever, you want to make your situation work. I think most people genuinely, that's true. Probably all of us, if we had a situation with a manager where if they really just would have asked us, we would have told them why we were unhappy, but they didn't ask, and so at what point do you get to volunteer that information? So I would say the listening, the being vulnerable, genuinely asking with a spirit of inquiry, and staying consistent would be some ways to build trust.
Yeah, the consistency is kind of it's kind of key, and not even just sort of in the way that we work, but the consistency that we bring to people. And my question, the follow-up question to you, Amanda, as well, is that how can we support that consistency when we as people don't feel consistent? We have up days and we have down days. We can't be robots to our teams, but when we don't feel consistent ourselves, how can we show consistency to our teams in absence of that?
That's a really human question, right? Like, how do I be the best version of myself when I'm not, And unfortunately, I think there's some responsibility on people managers where you have to do it anyway, right? If the stakes are too high unfortunately for you, and hopefully you have a people manager and your people manager is helping you, right? And so I think that if you yourself are a people manager and you are struggling to be the best people manager you can be, then you also need help, right? You should go to your manager, say like, I need to pay attention to my people, but I've got too much stuff I have to do, right? I don't have time to have my meetings. Like, something's got to go if you want me to be a good people manager, right? Or maybe you're getting feedback from your employees that you're missing like a certain soft skill, like I don't like the way they communicate, right? Or whatever. I'll say, I would like to take this seminar on better communication, whatever it is. Like, I think that I realize that you aren't always consistent, but also know that you're also an iteration. You're also growing. You're also a person, and you just have to do the work to try to be best. And hopefully, as Janet said, the trust is there, that on your off days, your team will still be there for you and understand, because they trust that probably tomorrow he'll be a little better. She'll be a little better. Today, she's having a hard day, and that's okay, because they're a person,
I love that answer. Thank you. Janet, I'm going to throw this next one to you. You've taken ownership of a massive team here at Kodeco. Another great question here. Are there really good resources or a go-to resource for you to learn or relearn people management?
I don't have any specific book titles off the top of my head. And I think in the true spirit of Kodeco, we learn by doing. So the best way to learn about people management is to work with the people that, work closely with your direct reports as when you can. I know it's not always possible, but I think find opportunities to do that. I think Manda mentioned earlier about people first KPIs through one-on-ones, and those one-on-ones don't always have to be about work. And I sometimes find that, because we have work on our mind, we have a project that's due, a lot of my one-on-ones ended up becoming about a specific project. So I try to mitigate that by having working sessions, like small group, usually it's no more than 4 people. We're working on a project together, and it's a really great way to see, to get to know direct reports that way, is how they work, how they solve problems in the real setting. And you're working not as their boss per se, you're not directing them, you're working alongside them. And I think it's a powerful learning experience to learn about someone as an individual, not just the personal side of things, but also the professional side, how they solve problems in a small group or even just by themselves, right? And also it's been a way for me to truly understand specific pain points. And I think that's a really great way to learn to manage, is by working alongside them. And then really understanding their pain points from their perspective, right? So.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I know all three in this call here are bibliophiles. We love our books as well, and your point that no book titles come immediately to mind makes me think about my career as well. I've got a whole bookshelf over there. Like they're out of sight, so you can't see my stacks of cluttery books. But I've read lots of books over the years about management and people management and organizational change and things like that. And you read the book and you become inspired and say, wow, this will work. And then I guarantee within a month, something will slap you in the face. It's like, wow, I didn't expect this. So I will say I don't think it matters which book you read, folks. Unfortunately, there's a lot of good ones. But I will tell you from experience that no book will ever prepare you for what may come and slap you in the face for people management. But it's good to think about it. If you don't read about it and you're not thinking about it, I would say you're probably not taking seriously enough. It is something that always is at the front of mind. And I read for new inspiration, not new tactics, I guess is what I would say. I'm going to grab one more question. We've got time for one more. And I'm going to broaden the scope of this question a little bit because it's very developer specific and we've got a bunch of developers here. We've got someone, he says, we're talking about KPIs and we're talking about checking on people. Do you have an idea how, and let me broaden this a bit. Do you have an idea how a technical team leader could objectively and quantitatively assess a developer's performance at a moment? And let me broaden that, say not necessarily developer, but you've got someone in a very agile setup. They're very dynamic. They're switching between projects a lot, and the plan you had for them in January is not what they're doing in May, for instance. Manda, how would you suggest approaching building KPIs and building check-ins for a person where what they do is very dynamic?
Yeah, I think some of the things shouldn't be dynamic, right? Like, I think that you should be hiring, recruiting, and training to honor your company's values and your core values, right? Like what you're about. And I think that the output, the actual like numerical KPIs, did they turn in their project? Did they deploy on time? All that kind of stuff that I can't advise too much on given the topic. But I would say in the roadmap, right, that you're developing, in the strategic roadmap that you're developing for the person, there should also, again, be these sort of like, not necessarily even people KPIs, but these people-based things that you value. Are they communicating with the team well? Are they responsive? Are they, how are they showing up? Are they collaborating in a way that's helpful? And pay attention to that as they do their work, because I think that some of that stuff, who we are, who we show up as at work, how we treat other people, how we honor the core values of our organization, the mission that we're all moving forward. Are we doing that with respect and kindness and integrity? I think that you can pay attention to no matter what's happening in the agile environment. And I would recommend still giving feedback on those sorts of things to help people keep growing as people in helping the whole organization move forward together in a positive way. Thank you.
Yeah. I fully agree. I just have one question pop in here, and I do want to throw this to Janet if I can with the last few minutes here. There's a question from Chuck. Thank you. It's in the chat. And Chuck is kind of in a roundabout way, I think, asking about bidirectional reviews or 360s, something like that. Janet, Chuck asks, how can the employee help the manager to be a better manager? This is known as managing up, managing from the bottom sometimes. It's a tricky thing. We try to have a very open approach to this at Kodeco with lots of round feedback. How can you suggest employees approach this with maybe grace and delicacy about how do you help coach your own manager?
I think, as Manda mentioned earlier, feedback is very powerful, and it's something that, it's also cultivated over time, how comfortable someone is with giving feedback. And I will admit that something that I have often forgotten to ask my team is, do you have feedback for me? I think sometimes I'm curious about how they think about a project, how they are doing. And a big part of it too is, how am I doing to support them? And I think it's important to make a point, and to do that consistently is, make ourselves vulnerable and actually make a point to ask for feedback. And it's not because I don't care. Sometimes I just really forget because I'm trying to finish things on time, but and do that consistently, because I think from the perspective of an employee, it could be very alarming when my manager came out of nowhere to say, hey, do you have feedback for me, after not asking for a year. So I think making it consistent during one-on-ones, or even working sessions, as I mentioned earlier, when you work together, you could ask like, hey, how did that go for you? Like, how was that facilitated? What do you think about that? Because sometimes when we ask for feedback, It can be directly about us or indirectly, right? It can be about something that we worked on or how we responded or how we facilitated a meeting, and do that consistently. I think that's a really good way to get coaching from direct reports.
Now, let me follow on just a little bit there, because there's always with that boss employee dynamic, there's always the chance that we say, do you have any feedback for me? Nope, I have no feedback. Do you keep up the requesting with that person, or do you sense that as a way to back off? How do you handle that? Do you keep the door open? Do you keep suggesting it to them until they have feedback? Or how do you handle the person that says, no, I have no feedback, when you know in the back of your mind they probably do?
Yeah, I think as we develop rapport and trust, it's important to not over rely on yes or no questions. And I'm guilty of it. I ask, when someone asks you, do you have something or do you not? Like, yes or no questions are easier to say no to. So I will rephrase that question to how. How did that go? How was I can't think of an example right now, but something, change it to how questions. How do you think I did? Or what are your thoughts about the way I responded in this situation? Something like that. Rephrase that question and make it not so much yes or no, but more of a how question, I think can be very helpful.
I think that is a fantastic. Oh, go ahead, Manda, please.
Add on to that, I know we're short on time here, but I think also have I questions, right? If you want feedback about yourself, if your subordinate is underperforming, subordinate's a dirty, gross word, but you know what I mean, we're all here for it. So if the person you're managing is underperforming, you should look at yourself first, right? And you can ask them, have I given you enough time for this project? Have I set you up for success? Have I resourced you correctly? Right? So if you ask questions like that, you will get the feedback about yourself, and it's a little more closed, right? But it's also more actionable, right? And if they say, actually, this did feel rushed, this felt like, or I went to do it and I didn't know how, so I had to spend 2 hours teaching myself this process, right? Things like that will emerge, I think. And we saw this sometimes with the book teams, Chris, when maybe they weren't hitting deadlines or something. And my question to them was always like, do you feel supported? Are the deadlines too tight? Was the chapter too big? Did something happen in the technology? Have we set you up for success to be able to even match this goal that we've all outlined together? So I think that can be helpful as well.
I think those are both fantastic approaches to questions to help bring people up, because you're absolutely right. The yes and no are not right. And Manda, your pivoting of the question to put the focus on their experience, I think, is absolutely critical. I could go on all day, and thank you so much. We are at the end of our time, folks. Thank you for everyone who has dropped a comment in there. We will draw one at random to receive one of our Kodeco books. You choose what you want. But Manda and Janet, thank you both so much for coming today. And thank you, audience, as well, for coming and being with us in this space. This is Side of Code. Code is great. Building things is great. Teams are great. Companies are great. But these people first conversations, I think, are the critical way to really move companies forward ahead in 2023 and beyond. So thank you both. Thank you, audience. And thank you for coming. Appreciate this.